My husband told me he's sick of babysitting our newborn. Please help. I think I made the biggest mistake of my life marrying him. I'm 25. I met my husband when I was 20, and he was 30. We worked in the same office. He was a supervisor, and I was a summer intern trying to figure out my life. Even with the age gap, our relationship always seemed to work. I thought I'd found the perfect man, mature, charming, completely devoted. But what if the person you love most is actually a predator, meticulously planning to brand you an unfit mother and take your child away? I found out the hard way, and it was a betrayal that shattered my entire world. I met him at work, and honestly, I was captivated. He was older, so smart, so charming. He just had this way of guiding me that felt so comforting, something guys my own age couldn't offer. I fell for him hard and fast. After just 8 months of dating, he proposed, and I said yes without a second thought. I genuinely believed he was the most perfect man I could ever hope to find. Calm, level-headed, mature. Everything I thought I wanted in a partner. That's why his behavior after our daughter was born was such a gut punch. Our little girl was only 3 months old, and she wasn't sleeping through the night. And every single time she cried, I was the only one getting up. For 2 agonizing weeks, I ran on next to no sleep. I was a zombie. I finally sat him down, looked him in the eye, and told him, as honestly as I could, that I was completely exhausted. I desperately needed his support, especially during this incredibly difficult time. He just sighed, said I should have expected this from a newborn, but he'd try to help more. He did, for exactly 1 week. He actually started waking up with me, trying to comfort her. But then, just like that, it stopped. Any time I tried to wake him, he'd just grunt, pull a pillow over his head, trying to block out the sound of his own baby crying. It made me feel so utterly alone in our own home. I was adrift. I ended up calling my mom and even my mother-in-law, just begging for advice. Both of them were incredibly supportive, and I could tell they were genuinely upset by what I was going through. My mother-in-law, bless her heart, actually called him the very next day and absolutely chewed him out. She told him, in no uncertain terms, that he needed to step up and be a father to his child. Her words, surprisingly, snapped him into action. He started waking up at night. He'd watch the baby during the day so I could finally grab a short break. See, he'd convinced me to quit my job when I got pregnant, so I was home with our daughter 24/7. Even an hour or 2 to myself felt like a lifeline. I actually thought for a moment that things were finally getting better. I was wrong. About 3 weeks into his newfound helpfulness, everything imploded. The baby started crying in the middle of the night, and he suddenly sat bolt upright in bed and screamed at the top of his lungs that he was tired of this. His yelling only made our daughter cry even harder. I rushed into the nursery, and he followed me, still shouting. He called me lazy. He said he was sick of babysitting our little brat, and that this was a wife's duty, not his. He said I knew what I was signing up for when I got pregnant and that I was unreasonable to expect this much help. I didn't argue. I just stood there, holding our screaming baby, tears streaming down my face, while he screamed at both of us in the dark. I slept in the nursery that night. It was the first time I ever felt genuinely afraid of the man I married. From that moment, resentment started to fester, growing stronger with each passing day. I stopped asking him for help. I stopped talking to him about anything that wasn't absolutely necessary. I moved through our house like a ghost, taking care of our daughter completely alone, while he played video games, watched TV, or went out with his friends. I kept telling myself it would get easier once the baby slept better. I kept telling myself I was overreacting, that all new parents went through rough patches. Then last Tuesday happened. My mother-in-law came over unexpectedly while my husband was at work. She sat me down in the kitchen and asked if everything was okay. I instinctively said things were fine. She just stared at me for a long, heavy moment, then pulled out her phone. She told me her son had called her the night before to complain about me. She said he told her I was an unfit mother and that he was actually considering filing for full custody of our daughter. full custody. She said he claimed he'd been documenting everything I did wrong since the baby was born and had already spoken to a lawyer. My mother-in-law's hands were shaking as she showed me the texts. She said she didn't believe a word of it, that she knew exactly who her son really was. That's why she came over without telling him first. I sat there, reading messages where my husband described me as mentally unstable, neglectful, potentially dangerous to our child. Messages where he talked about presenting himself as the responsible parent who tried his best while his crazy wife fell apart. My mother-in-law grabbed my hand, her fingers cold, and told me to listen very carefully. She said she was about to tell me something about her son that she should have told me before I ever married him. Something about his first marriage that the whole family had been instructed to never mention. She leaned across the kitchen table, her voice dropping. I was already sitting, but I pulled my chair closer anyway. My daughter was asleep in her carrier next to me, breathing softly. My mother-in-law took a deep, shuddering breath and said, "My son was married before." The words didn't make sense at first. I just stared at her. She said his first wife's name was Mariana Thornton, and their marriage ended badly after he tried to control every single part of her life. She said Mariana was young like me when they met, and that he used the exact same tactics on her that he was using on me now. The isolation, the criticism, the way he made her feel like she was crazy for wanting basic support. My stomach churned. My mother-in-law pulled out her phone again and scrolled through more messages. She turned the screen toward me, and I saw texts from my husband to her about Mariana. He'd written that Mariana went crazy after their baby was born. He said he had to document everything for the courts because she was unstable. My mother-in-law's voice cracked. She said she believed him back then. She didn't support Mariana when she needed help, and she regretted it every single day. She watched her son destroy that woman's confidence, paint her as unfit, when really he just wanted control. I looked down at the texts and felt sick. The words were almost identical to what he was saying about me now. Unfit mother, unstable, dangerous to the child. It was like reading a script he'd used before. My mother-in-law kept talking. She said Mariana struggled alone for months, trying to prove she was a good mother, while my husband meticulously built his case against her. She said Mariana's father, Elliot, finally got involved and hired a lawyer named Kieran Owens, who knew exactly what to look for. That lawyer found all of my husband's twisted documentation and saw the pattern immediately. Normal new parent struggles, written down and twisted to sound like evidence of mental illness. A crying baby, described as proof of neglect. A messy house, framed as dangerous living conditions. The custody evaluator saw through it, too. She recognized that my husband was creating a false story to gain control, not because he actually wanted to parent the child. He just wanted to win. My mother-in-law said the evaluator's report was crystal clear about what my husband was doing and recommended Mariana get full custody. He was allowed only supervised visits because the evaluator didn't trust him alone with the baby. He went to 2 of those visits. Then he stopped showing up. Completely. He abandoned his own child rather than accept that he couldn't control the situation anymore. The family, she explained, was told never to mention this marriage or this child to anyone. My husband said it was too painful. He wanted a fresh start. Everyone went along with it because they believed his version of events. But now, my mother-in-law said she knew better. She saw him doing the exact same thing to me, and she couldn't stay quiet this time. I sat there, holding my sleeping daughter, and everything clicked into place. The quick engagement after only 8 months. The age gap that made him seem so much more mature and stable. His insistence that I quit my job when I got pregnant, making me financially dependent. The way he'd help just enough to look good when someone was watching, but then stop the moment the pressure was off. The screaming fit in the nursery that seemed to come out of nowhere, but was probably designed to make me look unstable if I reacted. The documentation he was building right now, while I thought we were just going through a rough patch. It was all deliberate. It was all calculated. He had done this before, and he was doing it again. My mother-in-law reached into her purse and pulled out a piece of paper with a phone number written on it. "This is Elliot Thornton's number," she said. "You need to call him today. Elliot's lawyer, Kieran Owens, specializes in cases exactly like this. He'll know what your husband is planning based on his previous behavior." She warned me, "You don't have much time. He's already building his case. The longer you wait, the harder it will be to fight back." I took the paper, my hand shaking now, just like hers had been. My mother-in-law stood up and hugged me tight. "I'm so sorry I didn't tell you this before you married him," she whispered. "I thought maybe he had changed, but I should have known better." She promised she would help me any way she could and would testify about his past if it came to that. Then she left. My husband would be home soon, and she didn't want him to know she'd been there. I waited until that afternoon, when I knew my husband would be tied up in meetings at work. I sat on the couch with my daughter in my lap and dialed Elliot's number. He answered on the second ring. I told him who I was, and there was a long, heavy silence on the other end. Then, his voice tired and sad, he said, "I wondered if he'd do this again to someone else." He told me Mariana had a hard time trusting people after what my husband put her through. The custody battle had destroyed her confidence, even though she won. She spent years in therapy, trying to undo the damage, trying to believe she wasn't a bad mother. Elliot asked me a series of questions. "Is he documenting things, making accusations about your fitness as a parent?" "Yes." "Has he isolated you from your job, your support system?" "Yes." "Does he help just enough to look good, but then blame you for everything when no one's watching?" "Yes, yes to all of it." Elliot told me Mariana went through hell because she didn't take action early enough. By the time she realized what was happening, my husband had months of documentation and had convinced people she was unstable. "You need to contact Kieran Owens immediately," he urged. "Start your own documentation before your husband can build his false case any further. Kieran will know exactly what he's planning because he's seen it all before. Don't wait even one more day." He gave me Kieran's direct number. I called Kieran as soon as I hung up with Elliot. His assistant answered, and I explained who I was and why I was calling. She put me on hold for less than a minute. Then Kieran picked up. He said Elliot had just texted him to expect my call. He had an opening the next morning if I could come in. "Yes." I blurted without hesitation. He told me to bring any documentation I had, including the text messages my mother-in-law had shown me, and write down everything you can remember about your husband's behavior since the baby was born, he instructed. Every time he refused to help, every time he yelled, every time he made you feel like you were failing. Details matter. Dates and times, if you can remember them. The next morning, my mother-in-law came over to watch the baby. I had barely slept. I had spent most of the night writing, and the list was far longer than I ever expected. Kieran's office was in a tall building downtown. I felt a knot of nerves in my stomach as I walked in. His assistant led me to his office. He stood up, a man of about 50 with kind eyes and graying hair, and shook my hand. He gestured for me to sit and asked me to start from the beginning. I told him everything, about meeting my husband at work, the whirlwind romance, the quick engagement, how he asked me to quit my job, about the baby, the sleepless nights, his refusal to help, the screaming fit in the nursery, my mother-in-law showing me those devastating texts, his plan to call me unfit and build a custody case. Kieran listened without interruption, scribbling notes on a legal pad. When I finished, I showed him the photos of the text messages my mother-in-law had sent me. He read them carefully, his expression growing more serious with each word. "Your husband's pattern is textbook manipulation," he said, "designed to gain custody and control. Men like him don't actually want to be primary parents. They want to win, and they want to punish their partners for not being controllable anymore." He explained that the documentation my husband was doing was meant to create a false narrative, painting him as the stable, responsible parent and me as someone falling apart. Family court sees this more often than people realize, he added. But it's hard to prove unless you know what to look for. He asked if I had any documentation of my own. I showed him the list I'd written the night before. He read through it, nodding. This is a good start, but you need to be more detailed going forward. He pulled out a new notebook and handed it to me. Write down everything with specific dates and times, he emphasized. Every diaper you changed alone. Every night feeding. Every time your husband played video games while you begged for help. Every time he went out with friends while you stayed home, exhausted. He advised me to take photos of the apartment showing baby supplies, evidence of childcare. Document the unequal division of labor in concrete ways that will be hard to dispute. Kieran leaned back. Your husband has likely been documenting normal new parent struggles and framing them as evidence of instability. A baby crying because babies cry, he'll write down as you not being able to soothe the child. A messy living room because you're too tired to clean will be described as neglect. Times when you're short-tempered from lack of sleep will be recorded as anger issues. He'll take normal human reactions to an impossible situation and twist them to support his narrative that you're unfit. You need to start building your own record that shows the truth, Kieran stressed, that you are doing all the childcare alone, that your husband refuses to help despite having the time and ability, that his explosive outburst in the nursery was what actually made our home unstable. He also told me to document any other controlling behavior, him making me quit my job, isolating me from support, any financial control he exerted. These patterns matter, he explained, because they show his real motivation isn't about being a good father. It's about maintaining control over you and using our daughter as a tool to do that. You need to be strategic and careful, he cautioned, because your husband is already several steps ahead. But you also have advantages he doesn't expect. You have his mother, willing to testify about his past. You have Elliot and potentially Mariana, who can establish a pattern. You have the truth on your side, even if it will take work to prove it. I left Kieran's office and drove straight home, the new notebook sitting on the passenger seat. My daughter was asleep in her car seat, and I kept glancing back at her in the mirror, the terrifying thought echoing. My husband was building a case to take her away from me. When I got home, I put her down for her nap and sat at the kitchen table with the notebook open. I started writing everything I could remember from the past 3 months, with as much detail as I could manage. The date, 2 weeks after she was born, when I first asked him for help and he told me I should have expected this. Every single night, I got up alone. Every time I begged him to watch her for just an hour so I could shower or eat. The afternoon, he yelled at me in the nursery and called her a brat. Every time he went out with friends or played video games for hours while I handled everything alone. The pattern became horrifyingly clear when I saw it all written out. 3 months of me doing everything, while he did almost nothing except complain. 3 months of him treating fatherhood like an annoying chore he could avoid if he just ignored it long enough. I filled 12 pages in that notebook, and my hand was cramping by the time I finished. The next morning, I called Kieran and told him I'd written everything down. He said that was excellent and I needed to keep adding to it every day. Then he suggested I take my daughter to her pediatrician for a regular checkup and casually mention the stress at home during the appointment. He explained that doctors are required to report concerns about family situations, and having a medical professional document what I was going through could significantly help my case later. He told me to be honest about how exhausted I was, about how little support I was getting. I scheduled an appointment for that same week. When I brought my daughter in, the pediatrician, Alina, weighed and measured her, saying she was growing well. Then Alina looked at me, and her expression changed immediately. I must have looked terrible. She asked if I was getting enough sleep, if I had help at home. I tried to hold it together, but I just started crying right there in the exam room. I told her everything. The sleepless nights, my husband refusing to help, him screaming at us in the nursery, feeling completely alone, even though I was married. Alina listened intently, taking notes on her computer. She said what I was experiencing was incredibly hard, and asking for help with a newborn was completely normal and healthy. New parents are supposed to work together, she said, and it wasn't right for me to be handling everything by myself. She asked if I felt safe at home. I said yes, but I wasn't sure if that was true anymore. She made more notes, telling me she was documenting everything to ensure my daughter and I had the support we needed. When I left that appointment, I felt an immense sense of relief. Someone finally believed me. Someone saw what was really happening. My husband came home from work later and acted like nothing was wrong. He asked about my day, smiled at me like we were a normal, happy family. I told him the baby had a checkup and everything was fine. "That's good," he said, then went to the living room to turn on the television. I stood in the kitchen, watching him, and realized he had no idea. No idea his mother had told me his plans. He didn't know I'd talked to Elliot or met with Kieran. He thought he was still in control, and I was just his tired wife who would keep doing what he wanted. I knew I had to keep it that way while I prepared. I couldn't let him know I was building my own case until I was ready. Over the next week, I started staying at my mother's house on the nights my husband worked late. He said it was probably good for me to have my mother's support. He didn't ask when I'd come back or say he missed us. He just seemed glad we were gone. That confirmed what I already suspected. He saw us as burdens, not his family. He didn't want to be a father or a husband. He just wanted to win whatever game he thought we were playing. My mother helped me during those nights, and I finally got some real sleep for the first time in months. But more importantly, she helped me document everything. We went back to my apartment one afternoon when my husband was at work. My mother took photos of everything. The kitchen sink full of bottles I'd washed. The laundry folded in baskets. The nursery kept clean and organized. Then she photographed my husband's gaming setup in the spare room. His expensive computer, all his games lined up perfectly. The contrast was obvious. I was managing all the baby care alone, while he spent his free time playing video games. We had visual proof of how unequal everything was. I met with Kieran again and showed him the photos and my updated notebook. He said I was doing exactly what I needed to do. Then he told me I should suggest marriage counseling to my husband. My initial reaction was dread. Why? I asked. Kieran explained that my husband would probably refuse or try to sabotage it. Either way, that would further demonstrate he wasn't interested in fixing our relationship. It would prove his focus was on building a custody case, not on being a better partner or father. I didn't want to go to counseling with him, but I understood why Kieran was suggesting it. It was another piece of evidence that would help protect my daughter. That weekend, I brought it up over dinner. I told him I thought we should try marriage counseling because things had been really hard since the baby was born. He immediately got defensive. "You're overreacting," he snapped. "All new parents go through rough patches." I stayed calm. "I still think it would help us," I insisted. He got more agitated. "You're trying to make me look bad," he accused. "Why would you think that?" I asked. "If counseling is supposed to help both of us." He stood up from the table. "You're being unreasonable." Then he grabbed his keys and stormed out of the apartment. I heard him slam the car door and drive away. I sat there alone with my daughter and added this conversation to my notebook. Date, time, and his exact words. About an hour after he left, I heard a knock on my door. It was my neighbor from across the hall. She asked if everything was okay because she'd heard shouting. I told her we'd just had an argument, but everything was fine now. She looked concerned. "I've heard him yelling before," she said. "I just wanted to make sure you were safe." I thanked her, grateful she checked on me. After she left, I wrote down that conversation too. A witness, just in case. My mother-in-law called me the next day. She said she felt so guilty for not speaking up sooner about her son's past. She should have warned me before I married him, she said, but the family had agreed never to talk about his first marriage. I'm done protecting him from the consequences of his actions, she declared. Then she offered to write a statement about everything that happened with Mariana and how my husband was following the same pattern with me. She said if it would help my case, she would put it all in writing and testify if necessary. I told her I couldn't ask her to do that. He was her son. That's exactly why I need to do it, she countered. Being his mother means I have a responsibility to stop him from hurting more people. I thanked her, my voice thick with emotion, and told her I would let Kieran know. After we hung up, I sat there, holding my daughter, and for the first time, felt like I actually had a chance to protect her from my husband. 3 days passed, and my husband's mood changed completely. He came home from work on Thursday evening and found me feeding the baby in the living room. He sat down next to me and said almost casually, maybe we should try marriage counseling after all. I looked at him carefully. The sudden shift felt deeply wrong. He pulled out his phone and showed me a therapist's website. Her name was Whitney Flores, and she specialized in family counseling. He said he'd been thinking about what I said and realized we needed professional help. I told him I'd think about it and let him know. After he went to bed, I texted Kieran about the sudden change. He called me, back within 5 minutes. Your husband probably already talked to Whitney Flores, he said, and he knows she'll support his version of events. Abusers often suggest specific therapists who they've already consulted, or who have reputations for believing whoever contacts them first. He told me to insist on choosing my own therapist and watch how my husband reacted. The next morning, I told my husband I appreciated him being open to counseling, but I wanted to pick the therapist myself. His face changed instantly. Why can't you just use the one I found? He demanded. I said I wanted someone neither of us had any connection to, so it would be fair. He stood up from the kitchen table. You're being controlling, he shouted. I'm trying to fix our marriage, and you're making it impossible. He called me unreasonable, said I always had to have things my way. I stayed calm, even though my hands were shaking. I pulled out my phone and added his reaction to my notes with the date and time. He saw me typing. What are you doing? He asked, his voice rising. I told him I was just keeping track of our conversations about counseling. He got even more upset. You're trying to build a case against me, he accused. I didn't argue. I just kept typing while he yelled. Eventually, he grabbed his keys and left for work early. I called Kieran after he drove away and told him what happened. Kieran said my husband's reaction proved his point. Someone who genuinely wanted to fix their marriage wouldn't care which therapist they saw. I spent that afternoon researching family therapists and found someone with excellent reviews who had experience with custody cases. Her name was Dr. Sarah Tan, and she even had evening appointments available. I booked our first session for the following Tuesday. When my husband came home that night, I told him I'd scheduled counseling. He asked who I picked, and I showed him Dr. Tan's website. He looked at it for a long time, his face flat and angry, then just said, "Fine." The next week felt incredibly tense. He barely spoke to me, except to confirm the appointment time. I continued caring for our daughter alone while he worked and played video games. My mother-in-law called twice to check on me, and I told her about the counseling. She sounded doubtful, but hoped it would help. Tuesday evening arrived, and we drove to Dr. Tan's office in silence. The waiting room had comfortable chairs and soft lighting. A woman in her 40s came out and introduced herself as Dr. Tan. She led us into her office and asked us to sit on the couch. The moment we walked through that door, my husband's whole attitude shifted. He smiled at Dr. Tan, shook her hand warmly, and immediately started talking about how worried he was about me. He said I had been so stressed since the baby was born, and he didn't know how to help. He claimed he tried to support me, but I pushed him away. He said he loved our daughter more than anything and just wanted our family to be happy. I sat there, listening to him lie, and felt utterly sick. Dr. Tan turned to me and asked for my perspective. I told her about the sleepless nights, doing all the baby care alone. I told her about my husband screaming at us in the middle of the night calling our daughter a brat. My husband interrupted. She's exaggerating. All new parents get frustrated sometimes. She's making one bad moment into a huge deal. Dr. Tan held up her hand and asked him to let me finish. I continued, detailing how he refused to help, spending his free time gaming while I was exhausted. He shook his head like I was being dramatic. Dr. Tan started asking specific questions. Who does the nighttime feedings? I do all of them. Who changes diapers during the day? I do. Who takes the baby to doctor appointments? I do. She turned to my husband. Is this accurate? He said he helped when he could, but he had to work. Dr. Tan asked what his work hours were. 9 to 5 weekdays. What did he do in the evenings? He needed time to decompress after work. How much time did he spend directly caring for the baby each day? It varied, he said. She pressed for a specific number. Maybe an hour, he offered. More like 20 minutes, I interjected. Dr. Tan wrote notes on her pad. She asked me how many hours a day I spent caring for the baby. Basically all of them, I said, except when she's sleeping. Did I get breaks? Only when my mother comes over. How often was that? Once or twice a week for an hour or two. Dr. Tan looked at my husband. Do you think this division of labor is fair? He looked genuinely surprised by the question. She's a stay-at-home mom, he replied, as if that explained everything. Childcare is her job. She asked if he helped with housework. He said he took out the trash. Dishes? Laundry? Cleaning? That's also her job, he said again. The session ended. Dr. Tan said she wanted to see us again next week. We walked to the car, and my husband was silent until we got inside. Then he exploded. He said Dr. Tan was clearly biased against men. She asked unfair questions designed to make him look bad. He wasn't going back to someone who had already decided he was the problem. I tried to reason. She just asked about who did what tasks. He accused. Her tone was judgmental. She's one of those feminists who thinks fathers are useless. I stayed quiet and drove home. He refused to schedule another appointment. I texted Dr. Tan the next day and told her my husband wouldn't return. She said that wasn't uncommon and asked if I wanted to continue individual sessions. Yes, I said immediately. Over the next few weeks, I met with Dr. Tan alone. She helped me see patterns I had completely missed. She asked about how my husband and I met, the age gap, the quick engagement. Why did I quit my job? He suggested it would be better for the baby, I said. Did I want to quit? I hadn't really thought about it, I realized, because he seemed so sure it was the right choice. She asked about our dating period, and I slowly understood that he had always made the decisions. Where we went, what we did. Did I have friends outside our relationship? I realized most of my friendships had faded after we got married because he always wanted us to spend time together as a couple. Control doesn't always look like yelling and anger, Dr. Tan said gently. Sometimes it looks like romance and concern. She explained that the quick engagement meant I didn't have time to see who he really was. The age gap gave him more power. Him wanting me to quit my job made me financially dependent. Isolating me from friends made me emotionally dependent. I sat in her office and cried, not out of sadness, but because I finally understood what had happened to me. Meanwhile, my husband started working late more often. He claimed his company had a big project, extra hours. I didn't question it at first, but then my mother-in-law called me one evening. I need to tell you something, she said. Her sister had seen my husband at a coffee shop downtown at 6 p.m. talking to a man in a suit. Her sister recognized him and mentioned it. My mother-in-law, knowing his history, asked her son about it. He admitted he was meeting with his lawyer. He told her he was preparing his custody case and wanted to make sure everything was ready. She called to warn me immediately. I thanked her and called Kieran right away. We need to act fast, he said. If your husband files first, he'll control the narrative from the beginning. He recommended we file for legal separation before my husband could file his custody motion. I asked if we had enough evidence. We have your documentation, the therapist's notes, your mother-in-law's statement, and the pattern from his first marriage, he said. It's enough. We filed the papers that Friday. Kieran arranged for my husband to be served at his office on Monday morning. I spent the weekend at my mother's house with the baby because I was afraid of how he would react. Monday afternoon, my phone started ringing. It was him. I didn't answer. He called 6 more times. Then the text started. The first, I can't believe you would do this to me. The second, I love you and we can work this out. The third, you're making a huge mistake. The fourth, you're going to regret this. The fifth, I'll make sure you never see our daughter again. The sixth, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. I forwarded every single text to Kieran as they came in. 3 days later, Kieran called me. My mother-in-law had sent over her written statement. He asked if I could come to his office to review it before he submitted it to the court. I arranged for my mother to watch the baby and drove downtown that afternoon. Kieran's office was on the 4th floor of a brick building near the courthouse. The waiting room was sparse, functional. The assistant told me to go straight back. Kieran was at his desk. He stood up, gestured to the chair across from him, and slid a folder across the desk. I opened it and started reading my mother-in-law's statement. 6 pages. She described her son's first marriage to Mariana, how he seemed like a devoted husband at first, but gradually became controlling and critical. She wrote about how he convinced Mariana to quit her job and move away from her family. She detailed how he meticulously documented everything Mariana did after their baby was born, building a case that she was unstable. My mother-in-law admitted she believed him back then, didn't support Mariana, and regretted that decision every single day. She stated clearly that her son was following the exact same pattern with me, and she would testify against him in court if necessary. I finished reading and looked up at Kieran. This is powerful evidence, he said. It shows your husband has done this before. Judges pay attention when a parent's own mother is willing to testify against them. He asked if I was ready to move forward with the custody case. Yes, I said, my voice firm. Kieran made copies and filed them with the court that afternoon. He called me the next morning and said he had spoken with Elliot Thornton, Mariana's father. Elliot had offered to provide his own statement about what happened during their custody battle years ago. He also said Mariana was willing to speak with me directly if I wanted to hear about her experience firsthand. Kieran said it was my choice, but talking to Mariana might help me understand what to expect from my husband's tactics. I sat at my kitchen table, holding the phone, contemplating. Part of me was afraid to know how bad things could get, but another part of me knew I needed to be prepared. I want to talk to Mariana, I told him. He said he would pass along my number and she would reach out when she was ready. 2 days later, my phone rang from an unknown number. I answered and heard a woman's voice. Is this you? She asked. Yes, I replied. My name's Mariana, she said. Elliot gave me your number. Do you have time to talk? I said I did. We stayed on the phone for 2 hours. Mariana described exactly what I was experiencing. The documentation he kept, the accusations he made, the way he tried to isolate her from her family and friends. She told me he would act like a perfect father in public, but refuse to help at home. He told everyone she was mentally unstable and neglecting their baby, even convincing some people in their social circle that she was the problem. But then, she said, her father got involved and hired a lawyer who saw through the manipulation. The custody evaluator interviewed multiple people and recognized the pattern of control. She warned me that my husband would try to provoke me into reactions he could use against me in court. He might start arguments in public places or send messages designed to make me angry. Stay calm, no matter what he does, she advised. Document everything. The most important thing is to focus on your daughter's needs and let your husband reveal his true character through his own actions. I thanked her for talking to me. She said she was glad to help, and told me to call her anytime if I needed support from someone who understood. After we hung up, I sat on my couch and cried for 20 minutes. But these were different tears. I wasn't crying because I felt helpless anymore. I was crying because someone else had survived this, and I knew I could too. The next few weeks were strange. I knew what my husband was planning, but he didn't know that I knew. I stayed calm, focused on taking care of our daughter, and meticulously documented every interaction with him in my notebook. His behavior became more unpredictable during this time. The court had set up a temporary custody schedule where he was supposed to have our daughter every other weekend. His first scheduled visitation was on a Saturday morning at 10 a.m. I had everything ready by 9:30. Diaper bag packed, bottles, diapers, extra clothes, her favorite blanket. I waited in the living room, holding her. 10 a.m. came and went. 10:30 passed. At 11 a.m., I texted him, "Are you coming?" No response. At noon, I called. It went straight to voicemail. He finally texted me at 2 p.m., saying he'd been busy and forgot. He actually blamed me for not reminding him, even though the court order was clear about the schedule. I forwarded the entire text exchange to Kieran immediately. Kieran said this was good evidence that my husband wasn't actually interested in parenting, just in maintaining control through the court system. The court appointed a custody evaluator to interview both of us and make a recommendation about what arrangement would be best for our daughter. Her name was printed on the paperwork, but I focused on preparing for the interview instead of worrying about who she was. My husband went first, and I went 2 days later. I arrived at her office building downtown and took the elevator to the 3rd floor. The evaluator met me in the waiting room and led me to her office. She was wearing a blue blazer, notepad on her desk. She asked me to sit down and said the interview would take about 2 hours. She started with basic questions about my background and how I met my husband. Then she asked about our daughter's daily routine and who handled which responsibilities. I described a typical day, explaining that I did all the night feedings, all the diaper changes, all the doctor appointments, all the meal preparations. She asked what my husband contributed, and I told her he played video games and went out with his friends. She asked if I had any support system, and I told her about my mother and my mother-in-law. She seemed particularly interested when I mentioned my mother-in-law and asked what kind of relationship we had. I explained that she had been incredibly supportive and had even provided a statement about her son's behavior. The evaluator made notes and said she would be speaking with my mother-in-law as part of her investigation. She also said she would speak with Elliot Thornton, who had reached out to provide information about my husband's previous marriage. She asked if I knew about the first marriage, and I said yes. She asked how I felt about that information, and I said it helped me understand that his behavior was a pattern, not something I caused. She took more notes and nodded. During my interview, I showed the evaluator everything I had documented over the past months. My notebook with dates and times of every incident. The text messages my husband sent to his mother describing me as unstable. The text he sent me after being served with separation papers. I even showed her the therapy notes from Whitney Flores that documented my husband's refusal to participate in counseling. The evaluator spent a long time looking through everything. She asked specific questions about certain incidents, and I answered as honestly as I could. She seemed particularly interested in the parallels between my situation and what happened with Mariana. She asked if my husband had ever been physically violent. No, I said, but his anger felt threatening. She asked if I ever felt afraid in my own home. Yes, I admitted, especially after he screamed at me and our crying baby in the middle of the night. She wrote down everything I said and told me she would complete her evaluation over the next several weeks. She said she needed to conduct home visits to both residences and complete interviews with other people involved in our case. I thanked her for her time and left her office feeling like someone had actually listened to me for the first time since this whole nightmare began. 3 weeks later, Kieran called and said my husband's lawyer had contacted him with a settlement offer. My husband would agree to shared custody if I didn't pursue child support. Kieran asked what I thought. Is it a good deal? I asked, my heart pounding. Kieran said, absolutely not. He explained that my husband didn't actually want to parent our daughter. He wanted access to maintain control over my life and avoid paying child support. If he truly wanted to be involved, he wouldn't have missed his first visitation or refused to participate in therapy. The settlement offer was designed to benefit my husband, not our daughter. He recommended we reject the offer and proceed with the full custody evaluation. I agreed, and Kieran sent the rejection to my husband's lawyer that afternoon. 20 minutes later, my husband called me and screamed into the phone that I was being unreasonable and vindictive. He said I was keeping his daughter from him and that I would regret this decision. I stayed quiet while he yelled, and then hung up when he paused to take a breath. I saved the voicemail he left immediately after, where he called me names I won't repeat here. I forwarded it to Kieran, who simply said it was more evidence of my husband's inability to communicate appropriately. The custody evaluator scheduled home visits for both residences the following week. She came to my apartment on a Tuesday morning. I had cleaned the entire place the night before, making sure everything was organized. The evaluator walked through each room, taking notes. She looked at the nursery, where I had set up the crib, changing table, and rocking chair. She opened cabinets in the kitchen and saw the bottles and baby food I kept stocked. She checked the bathroom and saw the baby bathtub and cabinet locks I had installed. She asked about my daily routine with our daughter, and I walked her through a typical day. She seemed satisfied with what she saw and said my home was clearly set up for childcare. She visited my husband's new apartment 2 days later. Kieran called me that evening. The evaluator had contacted him with concerns. My husband's apartment had no baby supplies, no safety measures, and no evidence that he had prepared for our daughter to stay overnight. No crib, no changing table, no baby-proof cabinets or outlets. He apparently told the evaluator he was planning to buy everything he needed, but hadn't gotten around to it yet. The evaluator noted in her report that this suggested a lack of preparation and genuine interest in providing actual childcare. 6 weeks after our interviews, the evaluator submitted her final report to the court. Kieran received a copy and called me to his office to review it together. I sat across from his desk while he read sections out loud. The report meticulously described my husband's lack of preparation for parenting, his focus on appearance over substance, and his concerning pattern of behavior from his previous marriage. The evaluator wrote that my husband seemed more interested in winning a custody battle than in actually caring for our daughter. She noted his missed visitation, his refusal to participate in therapy, and his aggressive communication style. She documented the statements from my mother-in-law and Elia Thornton, which established a clear pattern of manipulation and control. Her recommendation was clear. She advised the court to grant me primary physical custody, with my husband receiving supervised visitation every other weekend. She recommended he complete parenting classes before any consideration of unsupervised time with our daughter. Kieran looked up from the report. "This is the best possible outcome we could have hoped for," he said, a gentle smile on his face. The court almost always follows the evaluator's recommendation unless there's compelling evidence otherwise. A wave of relief, so profound it almost made me dizzy, washed over me for the first time in months. My daughter was safe. I had legal protection from his manipulation. My husband's reaction to the report was immediate and explosive. Kieran called me the next day and said my husband had fired his lawyer and hired someone new. The new lawyer had a reputation for being aggressive, taking cases to trial even when settlement made more sense. Kieran said this was a common reaction from people who couldn't accept they were losing control. He told me not to worry. "The damage is already done," he assured me. "The court has an objective professional assessment of your husband's fitness as a parent and his manipulative behavior. No amount of legal aggression can change what the evaluator has documented. We have the statements, the text messages, the therapy notes, and the pattern from his first marriage. We're in a strong position going into the custody hearing." I thanked him and hung up the phone. I looked at my daughter, sleeping peacefully in her crib, and promised her that I would keep her safe no matter what happened next. The custody hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. I sat at the table next to Kieran, while my husband sat across the aisle with his new lawyer. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, with wood panels and fluorescent lights that made everything look washed out. My mother-in-law sat in the gallery behind me. I could feel her presence like a steady hand on my shoulder. The judge entered, a woman in her 50s with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, reading glasses hanging from a chain. Everyone stood. She looked at both lawyers and told them to proceed. My husband's lawyer called him to the stand first. He walked up, shoulders back, chin up, wearing a dark suit that made him look professional and responsible. His lawyer asked him about his relationship with our daughter, and he talked about how much he loved her, how he wanted to be involved in her life, how it broke his heart that I was keeping him away from her. He claimed I had turned his own mother against him by telling lies about his behavior. He said I manipulated everyone around me to make him look bad when all he wanted was to be a good father. His voice cracked at just the right moments, and he looked directly at the judge when he spoke. I watched him perform and felt sick to my stomach. I knew exactly what he was doing. The judge took notes and asked him a few questions about his schedule and living situation. He answered smoothly, explaining that he was working on setting up his apartment for overnight visits and was committed to completing any classes the court required. Then Kieran stood up for cross-examination. He asked my husband about his first marriage, and his lawyer immediately objected, saying it wasn't relevant. The judge overruled the objection. "Answer the question," she instructed. My husband shifted in his seat. He said his first marriage ended badly because his ex-wife had serious mental health issues. Kieran asked if he had children from that marriage. "Yes," my husband said, "one daughter." Kieran asked how often he saw his first daughter, and the courtroom went quiet. My husband looked at his lawyer, then back at Kieran. "The situation was complicated," he stammered. Kieran repeated the question. My husband admitted he hadn't seen his first daughter in several years because the custody arrangement made it too difficult. Kieran asked if the custody arrangement included supervised visitation, and my husband's face went red. He admitted that, yes, his visits were supervised at first, but he claimed his ex-wife had poisoned the evaluator against him. The judge leaned forward and asked my husband directly, "If you cared so much about being a father, why did you stop attending visits?" My husband stammered, saying the supervision was humiliating and expensive, and his ex-wife made it impossible. The judge made a note and told him he could step down. Kieran called my mother-in-law to the stand next. She walked up slowly and placed her hand on the Bible to be sworn in. Her voice shook when she gave her name, but she looked directly at the judge when she spoke. Kieran asked her about her son's first marriage, and she described the same pattern I had experienced. The accusations of mental instability, the documentation, the attempts to control and isolate. She said she believed her son back then and regretted it deeply, because she watched him destroy a good woman who was just trying to be a mother. She said when I called her for help, she recognized the pattern immediately and knew she couldn't stay silent again. My husband's lawyer tried to suggest she was biased against her own son, but she cut him off. "I love my son," she declared, her voice strong now, "but I love the truth more. I couldn't watch him hurt another woman and another child the way he hurt Mariana." The judge thanked her and she stepped down. Kieran called Mariana next, and I saw my husband go pale. Mariana walked in, wearing a simple blue dress, her hair pulled back. She looked nervous but determined. Kieran asked her to describe her marriage to my husband, and she talked about the same things I experienced. The charm at first, the quick engagement, the insistence she quit her job, the explosion after their baby was born. She described the accusations and the documentation, and the custody battle that followed. She said the evaluator saw through his manipulation and recommended supervised visits, which he attended twice before disappearing from their daughter's life completely. The judge asked Mariana how old her daughter was now. She's 7, Mariana said. The judge asked if my husband had made any attempt to contact his daughter in the past 5 years. No, none at all, Mariana replied. The judge turned to my husband. Mr. Husband's last name, if you are so devoted to fatherhood, why did you abandon your first child? My husband stood up, even though no one had called on him. Mariana is lying, he shouted, his voice cracking. She kept his daughter from him. The system is biased against fathers. His lawyer tried to get him to sit down, but he kept talking, his voice growing louder. The evaluator in his first case was incompetent, and the evaluator in this case is the same. Everyone is against me. No one will listen to the truth. The judge slammed her gavel. Sit down, Mr. Husband's last name, and be quiet, she commanded. The pattern is clear and relevant to assessing his current claims. Your testimony has been contradicted by multiple witnesses, including your own mother. Your lack of preparation for actual childcare and your abandonment of your first child show your real priorities. My husband's lawyer objected again, but the judge overruled it. I have heard enough. She announced her ruling. She was granting me primary physical custody, with my husband receiving supervised visitation every other weekend. She ordered him to pay child support based on his income and to complete parenting classes before any consideration of unsupervised time with our daughter. The supervision will continue, she stated, until he demonstrates consistent attendance and appropriate interaction with his child. My husband stood up again, shouting, "This is unfair. The system is rigged. Everyone is lying about me." The judge warned him to control himself or she would hold him in contempt. He grabbed his briefcase and stormed out of the courtroom without looking at anyone. The door slammed behind him, the sound echoing in the quiet room. I sat there, feeling relief wash through my entire body for the first time in months. My daughter was safe. I had legal protection from his manipulation. Kieran squeezed my shoulder. We won, he whispered. My mother-in-law came up and hugged me, tears running down her face. She apologized again for not speaking up sooner. What matters, I told her, is that you spoke up now. She said she was proud of me for protecting her granddaughter and that she wanted to be involved in healthy ways going forward. I agreed because I could see she genuinely wanted to help, and she had proven she would stand up for what was right, even when it meant standing against her own son. We left the courthouse together, and I called my mother to tell her the news. She cried on the phone and said she would come over that evening to celebrate. I picked up my daughter from my mother's house and held her close, promising her that everything would be okay now. The next few weeks felt like learning to breathe again. I started looking for part-time remote work, something that would let me earn money while still being present for my daughter. My mother helped with childcare, and slowly I started to feel like myself again instead of the exhausted ghost I had become. I set up a schedule and routines that worked for us. I had baby-proofed the apartment properly, creating a space that felt safe and calm. My confidence came back in small pieces as I realized I was perfectly capable of taking care of my daughter without my husband's help or his toxic criticism. The supervised visitation started 2 weeks after the hearing. My husband was supposed to come every other Saturday for 2 hours at a family center where a supervisor would be present. He showed up for the first visit 30 minutes late and spent most of the time on his phone. The supervisor's report noted that he held our daughter for maybe 15 minutes total and seemed more interested in appearing to be there than actually interacting with her. He missed the second visit completely without calling to cancel. He showed up for the third visit but complained the entire time about the supervision requirement, saying it was unnecessary and degrading. The supervisor noted his hostility and his minimal engagement with our daughter. Over the next 3 months, he attended only half of his scheduled visits. Each report from the supervisor documented the same pattern: distraction, minimal interaction, and complaints about the process. He never completed the parenting classes the judge ordered. He paid child support only after Kieran filed a motion for enforcement. It became glaringly clear that my husband didn't actually want to be a father. He wanted to win. He wanted control. When the court took that away from him, he lost interest in our daughter completely. 6 months after the custody hearing, my life looked completely different. I had found steady remote work, doing customer service that paid enough to cover our basic expenses. My mother helped with childcare 3 days a week, and we had established routines that my daughter thrived on. She was sleeping better, eating well, hitting all her developmental milestones. The pediatrician commented on how much healthier and happier she seemed. I was doing better, too. The constant anxiety and fear had faded. I could sleep without worrying about what my husband would do next. I could make decisions about my daughter's care without second-guessing myself or bracing for criticism. My mother-in-law visited regularly and had become a genuine source of support, rather than someone I had to manage carefully. She brought groceries, helped with laundry, and played with her granddaughter without any agenda beyond simply spending time together. I stayed in touch with Mariana, too. We talked on the phone sometimes, and she gave me advice about dealing with my husband's continued, albeit dwindling, attempts at manipulation through text messages and emails. She helped me recognize the patterns and stay strong when he tried to make me feel guilty or crazy. She told me it would get easier, and she was right. I thought about Elliot sometimes and how his courage to speak up had changed everything. He didn't have to get involved or risk my husband's anger, but he did it anyway because it was the right thing to do. My mother-in-law said the same thing about her own decision to testify. They both chose truth over family loyalty, and that choice saved me and my daughter. My career was slowly rebuilding. I had started taking online courses to update my skills and was looking into better-paying remote positions. My daughter was healthy and happy, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about her well-being instead of seeing her as a burden or a tool for control. Life wasn't perfect. Money was tight, and I got tired sometimes managing everything alone. But it was honest. It was safe. Nobody was gaslighting me or documenting my failures or threatening to take my child away. So, what do you think? Have you ever had someone you trusted reveal themselves to be someone completely different? What would you have done if you found out your partner was secretly building a case against you? Let me know in the comments below. I'd really love to hear your thoughts.